Welcome to This Just In, the show bringing you the latest advancements in healthcare, strategy, innovation, and public policy. And now, for the fastest voice in healthcare, here's your host, Justin Barnes.
Thank you for tuning in and welcome to This Just In. I'm your host, Justin Barnes. In these episodes, I'll bring you the latest advancements in healthcare, strategy, innovation, and leadership. As always, we're broadcasting from the This Just In studios on the Business Radio X network, the Healthcare Now radio network, and our newest broadcast partner, the Health Podcast Network. For today, my 355th episode, we have a very special show. It's not only special for its content, but I'm also inviting a very good friend onto the broadcast. But before we get there, I spent many months now focusing the show and most of my conversations on AI. And I feel compelled to host this episode to articulate a simple framework that anyone can follow to engage AI in their daily routine. I'm primarily going to focus on business use cases, but these principles that I'll share certainly transcend to our personal lives and all aspects of optimizing AI. So for this show, AI, a foundation for everyone. However, before we dive in too far, I want to welcome my good friend, Jake Reid, to the show. Jake has been on my team now for 3 years and has been a significant component in how I've learned and built my world around AI, and certainly in incorporating AI in almost everything that I do, from my personal development to the radio show, and certainly now as a trusted colleague in my growth performance company. Welcome to the show, Jake.
Thanks, Justin. You know, I'm usually behind the scenes helping run the show, but it's fun to experience what it's like on the other side of the mic.
Absolutely. And as we're talking off air and prepping for the show, I want you part of the show more often. I said at least probably quarterly will be good, maybe a little bit more. But yeah, you do a great job behind the scenes. But you also work with me a lot on these topics, on the research, bringing these documents and presentations and talking points together. And this is better than anybody else, or certain as well as most of us out here. So I'm grateful to have you. Glad you're here today. And let's just have a really good conversation. Again, this show for my audience came together really quickly because Jake and I have been working on an AI playbook in the background, but I think it's something that it was time to bring forward. We use it a lot, again, to prepare for my radio shows and make sure that we have the most relevant content to the topic. But I think it's time to really publicize this, begin talking about it more openly. And we deploy AI not only to stay ahead of where innovation is going and how it's being used in our society and communities, but also to ensure our business partners at Growth Performance, deploy the very best and most optimized AI strategies from the start. And certainly, from a radio show, this topic has been AI has been a topic for the last 6 months fairly heavily. Obviously, we've been talking about it for the last couple of years, but I think there's not a episode that goes by that we don't bring up AI. And it's not AI just to bring up the term. We're coming across real tangible best practices, real tangible use cases, how people are deploying it out in the real world, whether it's, for the most part, it's always in healthcare. However, we're deploying, AI internally to our own business operations. We work primarily in healthcare, but our operations, are all go to market for the most part. And so we use AI deployed across all those different mechanisms. And to be most optimized in everything that we do, we deploy AI and very intelligent AI. And I'm going to dive into that because that's kind of one of the tenets that came together for this show, and the reason why we wanted to have it sooner rather than later, because we find ourselves telling our peers, partners, clients on how to set up the right AI from the beginning. I think it's really important that I like to say, well, you may have some AI created and so maybe some small language models and large language models created. It's never too late to align or realign your AI strategy. This is not a short-term trend or a fad. AI will transform every aspect of our business and personal lives. And I know you hear that a lot, but the more I dive into it, the more I realize and I see it. So obviously, let me give you a hot take from you, Jake, before we dive in here.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, it's been great working alongside you on this AI playbook, and it's been an exciting project. It's also been a very educational project. As new use cases come up daily for this technology, you just need to stay on your toes to learn how to implement them for what you need. And as you had mentioned, it's never too late to refine your approach to AI, especially as it's constantly evolving, whether that be integrating the usage of an LLM or just further workflow automation. Just find the best use case for your scenario and go from there.
Yeah, great point. And I'm gonna dive into that, and we're gonna dive into that here in the next 22 minutes or so as we broadcast this show. But I've even been so inspired over the last really month and a half. I think we had John Halamka and Paul Serrato back to back to back in 3 different episodes. And you can't help but be tremendously inspired with John and Paul. And so from that, I actually decided to go back to school myself. So I actually started school, Stanford's Graduate School of Business with a concentration in digital transformation and AI next month. So I look forward to bringing some of those tenants here. We're actually going to create a playbook during that class as part of the course materials. So not the playbook that we're creating from our company, but a different playbook specifically on digital transformation and AI. That's one of the outputs from this business course. So I'm very excited. I actually used to live in Palo Alto initially when we were forming a company back in the 2000s, and it's going to be exciting to get back into Palo Alto at times. So looking very, very forward to that. But I think before we dive into some of the tenets, and again, we're going to create a 10 principle framework for everyone, starting with this show. We're going to walk through those pieces here in the next 20 minutes or so. But understanding, and then actually we'll create an ebook from this. I'm sure we'll create some blog and thought leadership posts. But it's really important to kind of from day one to set the mission. What is your goal? In mine specifically has been for the last 25 years, 30 years now, 31 years or so, is really create a more sustainable healthcare system. And Jake and I actually were talking off air a little bit about this. It's not really that we're ever going to spend less in healthcare, but we actually get, in my heart, I believe we can get a lot more for our money in healthcare. We can become a lot more optimized in what we do and how we deliver medicine, much more efficient in what we do. In the early days, 20 years ago, really worked a lot with Congress on the sustained growth rate and the administration as well, but specifically MedPAC and Congress, because every year, people may not know this, but there were physician cuts always in the budget. And so we're always working just to make sure those cuts would not go into place and look for offsets, either financial offsets or creating financial incentive models that would allow physicians to not only stave off the SGR cut, they call it the SGR cut, a sustained growth rate cut, part of the Medicare formula, but also get incentives, maybe a 3% or 5% increase in reimbursement if they move down some quality tracks or other types of tracks with financial incentives behind them. So something that has been near and dear to my heart for now well over 20 years. But that's really, the precipice of how I got involved deeply in this, not only in the tech side, but then also what do you bring directly to these providers? What do you bring directly to these health systems in our communities to enable them? Not only with technology, but healthcare ecosystems that are sustainable, that every family and individual can participate in. That's really deeply rooted in what I do, my guiding work, again, all my policy work, even how the show was founded. It's been a great journey. And now with the advent of chronic care management and value-based care, it's just going to continue on. So it's great to see those pieces. And without getting too deep too fast, how AI is being deployed in those markets and how AI is actually helping those specific tenants is significant. And here's my promise to you for taking the time to listen to this show and be a part of my different engagements is we will create this 10 principle playbook over the next couple of weeks. We'll begin to publish this out in multiple ways. And certainly, getting into 2026, you're going to see a lot more of this. I'm probably going to be dedicating at least half of my shows to AI best practices. A lot of them will be tailored towards healthcare, but also a lot of this, as you're going to hear, is transcends well past healthcare and applicable to your daily lives. I've even found it in a lot of my personal relationships. So it's kind of cool how, again, once you understand AI and how it can benefit you and how to really integrate it into your life cycle and your lifestyle, it can make a transformative change to you. And no pun there, because that is the name of John's new book and Paul's new book, Transform. But it is very transformative. So I'll stop there, Jake, before I continue on. Anything you want to add to that? I know that it's kind of cool because John and Paul almost as well as I do, just because you've been behind the scenes listening to all of those different shows and helping us put those segments together. But any thoughts that you have there?
Absolutely. No, I think really they've touched on it, especially in the first part of the show that they did about a couple of weeks ago. Just the efficiency that you can get from AI and not so much, the replacement or the fear that is kind of going around.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. And another good friend of mine in the industry, Jared Quaiser, with Louisiana Impact Fund, that group, private equity group. Jared brings up and he's got some great pieces that he's going to be publishing on in the coming months, a book and so forth that he's writing, but it really talks about the time that you're going to save with using and deploying AI personally, professionally, use that to really scale yourself, become more efficient. Don't just take the time off, but actually become an enabler of bigger things for yourself personally and professionally. So take the extra time that you're going to save and how you're being efficient, and don't just squander that away unless you need to. I mean, some of us need to take more time off. But for a lot of us who are achievers and overachievers, maybe we can achieve more in that 8-hour, 10-hour, 12-hour day. So, and think, how can, again, this doesn't have to always be in business. This can also be in our personal lives. How can we be better partners, spouses, husbands, wives, all that good stuff? So something really important to think about how AI can benefit you, not just only in the business sector with your teams, but also you personalizing. So brings it to my first principle, and our first principle. See AI as an amplifier, not a substitute. So again, I'm going to bring a lot of these references and examples will come back into healthcare, but this again transcends to personal lives, and no matter what sector you're in. But if you have a good workflow that you've already figured out, then AI would absolutely amplify that. But if you have a broken workflow or something that's not working, AI is not going to make it better. It's actually going to make it worse, and make it worse faster. So this is where good leadership and strong leadership comes in, and best practices and fundamentals. That's why AI is not going to replace everything. And there's no, again, what Jake said there, and certainly what Paul and John have brought up numerous times on the show before, is we still need humans. We still need to be in the middle of a lot of this, but see AI as an extension of what you do, as an amplifier of what you do, but an amplifier being, you need to make sure that you are deploying best practices. It's not a substitute for work. It's an amplifier for the work and the best practices that you've already created. So make sure you have those down pat. It'll absolutely, again, workflow is better or much worse. What are your thoughts there, Jake? I know you've worked a lot on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I see AI as, the replacement to friction, inefficiency, and especially burnout, staff burnout. And something that we say, especially within the healthcare sector, is AI isn't replacing clinicians, it's replacing frictions.
Actually, a great point. So, and not to jump ahead too far, because we'll bring up Chai and other organizations in a little bit, but people have run out there and rushed to implement chatbots without putting the workflow or the right requirements or guardrails around it. And so you've either had little value, or worse, you've had chatbots out there giving medical advice or medical information. And again, there's a balancing act there. You can certainly share information, but you gotta make sure it's medically relevant, customized to the patient. And again, we're working on putting some guardrails there, and I'll touch on that here in a little bit. But very important to pay attention to that. Again, what Jake said is make sure that you're focused on solving for inefficiencies, solving for burnout, which is significant in the clinical setting, and reducing the friction, because an AI can absolutely do that. The second principle is making room for AI. Leaders must create capacity for AI investments. So this is one of our clients and dear friends, AMD. They spend a lot of time with their customers, and certainly the larger ones, making sure, how can we do more with less? How can we innovate faster with maybe less of a footprint, and certainly less on the ecosystem? I mean, on the environment. Even these are very efficient types of systems and stacks that you can run, and you can cut down your operating power by half in a lot of different settings. It's just an example, and lots of people like Amazon, AWS, these people all experience this, and certainly Dell and AMD were part of all those different ecosystems. We've seen these tangible benefits right up front. So, but by shrinking that data center, it's just one example, but shrinking that data center, you can free up a lot of capital. We've had one of our customers free up $1 million a year in CapEx expense. So $1 million a year for, say, a health system, that makes a big difference to their operating budget, and makes room not only just to save the hospital money, but also invest in advanced AI in their organization, because they need to do it. So it's not just about spending more money; it's about how can you become more efficient, so you free up capital to invest in AI projects. And Jake, you've heard a couple of these. So what are some of your thoughts there?
Absolutely. So recently, you and I attended a AMD Dell AI Summit, and one of the key pillars that they were talking about was normalizing and modernizing before scaling AI. Too often we've seen organizations spend on AI pilots that stall because the fundamentals, the infrastructure, the clean data, the workflows, the operational alignment as a whole just weren't in place to scale.
Yep. No, excellent point. And so this is an opportunity to kind of do a reset and a reevaluation, and make sure that you're implementing and deploying AI in a real operationally efficient manner and way. The other thing I want to bring up is leadership in the AI age. I created the piece, and Jake and I actually created the piece together several months ago on not only it's leading, but in this new age and having high emotional intelligence or high IQ and creating a psychologically safe community and environment for your innovators, for your teams. You're going to need this intellectual space and advancements to truly deploy AI in a very innovative way for your business. It's not about doing, again, the same thing. This goes back to the whole workflows and really innovating around what you do. It's about you evolving as a leader, how you lead in these environments, how you foster a culture of innovation. And again, going back to having a real strong EQ, emotional intelligence for you as a leader, but then also fostering those types of environments, allowing creativity. Failure is fine. Fail fast. We do. I've been an entrepreneur for over 30 years. Failure is okay. You want to fail fast. You obviously want to fail safe. That's also the one thing that has come out a lot in the last couple of years is failing safe. But allow your teams to do that in a controlled environment. If you don't give them the space to fail and the opportunity to fail, you are going to fail in a bad environment. And in the day we work in hospitals and health systems and practices every day, we can't afford that. So we have to afford our teams to fail and stretch the limits and really test where they can go. And that's where a strong EQ as a leader comes into play, and really truly fostering a culture of innovation. Unfortunately, I see a lot of people talk about it, but they don't do it. They don't evolve their leadership skills. This is critically important. So something I want to touch on again, we published a piece here several weeks ago on that. It's done pretty well. I've been now on a couple of radio shows myself discussing that topic specifically, just because it's not just about putting AI into your engineering team and saying, all right, guys, figure it out. It's you leading them forward. You might have a great CTO or a great chief data officer or a great CIO, or chief innovation officer, all those. But you also, as the president, CEO, or leader of an organization, make sure that you're embracing those technologies, that type of leadership skills, and those leadership styles. It makes a very large difference. Which then leads into our third principle around guardrails and governance. And I brought that up a little bit. And our good friend John Hallam, because we brought it up a couple of times, he used the example: a soup can without a label is useless unless it's validated and transparent. So buying an AI algorithm today is like buying a soup can without a label. You have no idea what's inside, which is very, very true. So you got to make sure that you kind of know what you're buying. You've looked at how it's relevant to you. There's a lot of promises out there, but really understand what you're trying to solve. And I'll dive into that a little bit more in a future discussion here. But you need governance, you need transparency, you need clinical validation. So these are really important points that will help you create the right AI model from the start. Again, we want to do this show today, and we probably will do a follow-on show because the way we're tracking in time. This is about starting or reinventing or restarting your AI journey, about getting the right data, the right strategy, the right leadership, having the right guardrails, having the right governance. If you have all that, you'll have the most optimized AI strategy for your organization. But before I go on, what are some of your thoughts there, Jake?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned guardrails and governance, and that kind of made me think of what you alluded to earlier, is the work that you're doing with Chai.
Yeah, no, great point. So I'm sure many of you, certainly if you're in the healthcare ecosystem, healthcare world, there's a new organization. This guy's been out there for now almost a year, called Chai, the Coalition for Health AI, and it's creating those guardrails for responsible use of AI and deployment within the industry, and certainly some oversight here in due time. But really important for people, if you are in healthcare and you're thinking about deploying AI, take a look at chai.org, chai.org. It'll give you a good basis, but really, they're advancing the responsible development, deployment, oversight of AI in healthcare, and specifically fostering collaboration across the health sector, industry, government, academia, and patient communities, which is critically important. The fourth principle that we're going to get to, and hopefully we'll get through all five today, then we'll pile on five for another show. But the fourth principle is data strategy. And this is one that's kind of really come up to Jake and I over the last 6 months in a roaring way. First of all, know your data and know your sources. And Jake already brought up SLMs, so the small language models, the LLMs, the large language models. But it's really important to curate your data sources, the sites and sources that you know, that you trust, and that you know are validated, are peer reviewed. As many of us learned back, 30 years ago, and we're setting up our initial databases for the first time, garbage in, garbage out. So when we used to set up our contact databases or even our Salesforce implementation, stuff like that, you need to make sure you're putting clean data in there, because if you have bad info going in, bad info is going to come out of that system. So this is really going to be highlighted and spotlighted with AI. So you got to make sure that you know what sources your databases, your small language models or your large language models are pulling from. So for example, within our company specifically, we have a closed environment that we only pull in data that we know is curated from sources that we've all personally vetted, peer reviewed in most cases, well researched and validated, and we trust implicitly. Because then when we actually use our AI and run our queries, then we know what's coming out is trusted, is validated, and usually several times over. So that's really, really important. Don't just be pulling from the open internet, because this, as we all know, the internet is full of a lot of bad information and wrong information, and self-serving information in a lot of ways. So make sure that you're pulling from a closed ecosystem, and that you know exactly where your data is coming from. It'll save you down the road, because again, these language models are going to be used for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So that's one thing I've been really impressed with what Jake's been able to do, is create the best language model for us that is highly customized, extremely knowledgeable, and allows us to run 5 times faster than we were even 2 years ago. And it's quite impressive. So Jake, I want you to pick up a few words there for sure, because you've done a great job building this.
Yeah, so I think, like you said, it's really, you need to customize it for what you're doing. And so at Growth Performance, we're mostly in the healthcare sector, so that data has to be private. Whatever we're working with has to be private. And thankfully, since we're in the healthcare sector, there's a lot of guardrails around it. Most of our data is coming from government sources for the most part, or like you said, peer-reviewed articles. And so thankfully, we're in a situation where a lot of the data is easy to be verified.
Excellent. And then also, I know one thing that we've talked about recently is, in our good friend John and Paul have mentioned a few times in this show recently, data must be usable without compromising privacy. And I know that's big. That's big to Mayo for sure, but it's big to all of us, or needs to be big to all of us. So again, data must be usable without compromising privacy. So, this is a blueprint for secure access, platform approach, and industrialized implementation in that regard. And I know you've done a little bit of work on that with Mayo. So talk about that, Jake.
Yeah. So to that point, the last episode that you did with Dr. John Halamka and Paul Serrato, Paul explained how Mayo Clinic platform institutes this principle that they call the data behind glass. And essentially, it's just this federated system that developers can build and test algorithms with, even innovate on top of Mayo Clinic's data that they currently have. But the data itself never leaves Mayo's secure container. That way, you get the insights without compromising the patient privacy.
It's excellent. Thank you, Jake. So, and I'm going to leave you one more principle before we have to move on for this show, but we'll do a follow-up show, I promise. But the 5th principle, starting with AI. So pick one small measurable use case. And it could be example for in some clinics and health systems, ambient listening is a great one. Pathology pre-reads, patient translation tools. Plan for success, anticipate the workflow, work out the best practices on the workflow before you deploy the AI, because again, AI is going to amplify whatever you do, and also role changes when it works. I mean, this will work over time, so you've got to figure out, what roles and change, what roles will change, or organizational changes need to happen when you start to scale. And if it breaks, prepare for that, and then knowing what you're going to do to fix that and to realign. So we're obviously, this is, again, AI is applicable to almost everything that we're doing, no matter what industry you're in. Certainly in healthcare, ambient listening is a big one we've been reading a lot about lately. Go small and start small. Don't try to boil the ocean. There's a great couple of analogies that we'll give to you on our next show that we learned around the industry in the last even couple of weeks. But again, start small, a measurable use case. It might take 3 months, 6 months. It might take longer. That's okay. You got to start somewhere. But again, keep that data tight, secure, and make sure curated sources, but then pick your use case and go. It's very important. Anything you want to say in closing argument there, Jake?
No, you just mentioned the ambient listening. And I think that's the most practical use, just because patients are actually feeling heard, when their doctor's looking at them rather than having their back turned on a computer and typing away. I think that's just a great way to start.
Yep. Excellent. Appreciate that. I know there's a great, our buddy Tony Noon's, the great quote there is, don't try to eat the whole Christmas dinner. Just start off with the ham sandwich. It's a great analogy. Start small, but start somewhere. I love that. So anyhow, Jake, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you to everyone listening on air. As always, we truly appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. And a big thank you to all my listeners and supporters who voted us 2024 Podcast of the Year. We are so grateful. Tune into this show as a broadcast weekdays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Pacific. As always, you can find me on LinkedIn at Justin T. Barnes or track me on Twitter at HIT Advisor and use the hashtag ThisJustinRadio so we can respond to your comments from the show. If you missed any of this episode or want to hear more, all of my shows are posted on Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, Megaphone, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, and TuneIn. You can also check out some of the new content we just published on our thought leadership page at justinbarnes.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for tuning in and welcome to This Just In. I'm your host, Justin Barnes. In these episodes, I'll bring you the latest advancements in healthcare, strategy, innovation, and leadership. As always, we're broadcasting from the This Just In studios on the Business Radio X Network, the Healthcare Now Radio Network, and our newest broadcast partner, the Health Podcast Network. For today, my 356th show, we have a very special episode, not only for its content, but also I'm inviting back a very good friend onto the broadcast. But before we get there, I've spent many months now focusing this show and most of my conversations on AI, and I feel compelled to host this episode to articulate a simple framework that anyone can follow to engage AI in their daily routine. I'm primarily going to focus on the business use cases, but the principles that I'll share certainly transcend to personal in all aspects of optimizing AI. For this episode, AI, A Foundation for Everyone, Part 2. However, before we dive in, I want to welcome back my good friend, Jake Reid, to the show. Jake has been on my team for a little over 3 years now and has been a significant component in how I've learned and built my world around AI, and certainly incorporating AI into almost everything that I do. From my personal development to the radio show, and certainly now as a trusted colleague in our growth performance company. Welcome back to the show, Jake.
Thanks, Justin. It's an honor to be back. And, over the past 3 years, it's been incredible to work alongside you, not only with the show, but with growth performance, where we are really helping our clients think through and put AI into practice. And I'm excited to continue that conversation with you today.
Absolutely, my friend. And working on this playbook, for the past several months, mainly to prepare for the radio shows and also some conference panels that are coming up. But more importantly, as you mentioned, ensuring our business partners and growth performance clients deploy the most optimized AI strategies from the start. And for everyone, it's never too late to start, align, or realign your AI strategy, as this is not a short-term trend or fade, as most of us hopefully know. AI will transform every aspect of our business and our personal lives. Jake, and obviously before we dive in, share some of your thoughts there, because you actually taught me a lot about this, of how to incorporate AI, not only in the business life, but also into my personal world. And I absolutely love it. So share some thoughts there.
Right. Absolutely. What excites me the most is what we're seeing and how we're seeing AI move from being an experiment to being something that's woven into our everyday lives and our everyday workflows. For our clients, that means real opportunities to cut out inefficiencies and free up staff time and actually improve the patient and customer experience in measurable ways.
Yep, absolutely. And as I mentioned on our previous show, I was even inspired recently to go back to school to ensure that I have the best long-term foundation for how AI will transform every aspect of my life over the next decade and much longer, I'm sure. As I mentioned, I start Stanford Graduate School of Business this month with a concentration in digital transformation and AI, and I could not be more excited. So, important to set the mission, set the goal. You'll hear this throughout the day. You can start small, but begin really framing AI. It's more than tech. It's creating a sustainable, for our world, a sustainable healthcare system. And what I've been working on, for, 25 years, 30 years now, everything I do personally and professionally is rooted in creating a more sustainable healthcare system here in America, but also globally. I've traveled a lot, studied other healthcare systems to see what best practices we can export, but also what best practices we can import here back into the U.S. and what we do. It's guided a lot of my policy work, the show, and even how our clients deploy AI in the best way, and how some of my individual companies will deploy AI in the future. But here's my promise to you for certainly taking the time to listen today is I'm going to help by offering a practical, hype-free 10-point, 10-principle playbook for starting, scaling, and sustaining AI. I'm going to use this show as my platform today to begin this journey, but certainly in several conference panels that I have coming up and speaking engagements, I'm going to continue to share these principles, but then also get my peers to weigh in, see what they think, see how they're deploying AI, see where they started, see how they're scaling, and certainly would love anybody else's feedback. I always share my contact information at the end of this show, but Justin at justinbarnes.com. Feel free to send me any thoughts that you have, and what best practices that you're achieving in the industry, what you want to share. We all can learn together, and Jake and I will always add all the meaningful content to either our thought leadership, onto our radio shows, or into our individual principles as we continue to grow. But let's dive back into our playbook principles. We covered the first 5 on the show last week. But now kind of diving into our 6th principle, scaling AI. So there are really 3 pillars: strategy, infrastructure, and data integrity. So for strategy, start with a business or clinical problem that you're trying to solve, not necessarily the tool. So, and again, this is all applicable to your personal lives, but I'm going to focus mainly, my show is on our business lives, and I focus obviously a lot in hospitals, health systems, and medical practices. So the clinical side is really near and dear to my heart. But again, start with the problem that you're trying to solve. For example, scaling is about how many pilots you run. It's more about how many workflows you can trust AI to handle reliably. So I know, Jake, you've been working a little bit also alongside me here. So what's the great use cases that you've come across that would be applicable to my audience today?
Yeah, so the first thing that kind of comes top of mind is with prior authorization. And it's really an early scaling success story. Large language models can now wade through dozens of pages of clinical notes, labs, and results far faster than humans, and it can cut approval times drastically.
Absolutely. And so, he brought up large language models, LLMs, and obviously you're going to hear about SLMs, small language models. And so, most of us will be deploying large language models. And we'll probably do a show on the difference between SLMs and LLMs, but just so we hear these acronyms to know what they stand for. So that was for specifically the strategy side. Now for the infrastructure side, infrastructure enables performance, security, and scale. Scale is critically important to AI. Where you're going today, where you're going tomorrow, and certainly into the future, whatever you're building has got to have the openness and the interoperability for long-term innovation stability. So, do as well if this small, here's something that we say: if the small pilot works, what will break when we scale it? Anticipating these ripple effects is often a missing step, and people that they really don't take that important component into question early on. So we ask internally, where we, in our worlds, but also many of my peers, really think about, if this small pilot will work, what's going to break when we scale? The next piece is data integrity, which too many people also don't think about from day one. We need reliably sourced, validated, and or peer-reviewed data sources. Without clean, trustworthy data, the outputs just won't be reliable. And many of us were setting up databases 20, 30 years ago. The old adage, garbage in, garbage out. So really from day one, when you're setting up your strategy, and you'll hear more about this later on when we talk about, pouring that right foundation from day one, is when you pull from sources, again, make sure they're reliably sourced, validated, or peer-reviewed. Certainly in healthcare, that's really, really important. But you want to have a clean, trustworthy data source or data inputs. And you're going to have dozens and dozens, if not thousands, of inputs over time. But again, track them down, trust them. There's a lot of searches out there I've been doing even recently that are not validated. Just because people post things online, that does not mean they're true. And you certainly don't want them as part of your AI database, because your AI, you want to be able to trust it and trust your LLM that you're building to have the very best data. So again, garbage in, garbage out, to really protect that data at all costs, because that's the value of your AI moving forward. And again, a lot of us, our companies are everything. We're building our companies for, several years, dozens of years, or longer than that. And AI is a big component to everything that we're going to do. So again, make sure you have those reliable inputs. That's probably the most essential foundation outside of understanding how you can scale your AI, but making sure that data sources are perfected at all costs, and change them. If they're not perfected, pull them and then cleanse that data, but make sure the data is on point and accurate. For the seventh principle, and this is more towards healthcare. I talk to large audiences outside of healthcare, but for the most part, this show is focused primarily on healthcare. It's personalization in healthcare. Healthcare is inherently personal. Personalization must reflect that. So there's, AI is the most incredible, invisible, quote unquote, invisible technology. Patients can experience better outcomes, better journeys, smoother journeys with fewer errors. But again, that will come from the AI working in the background. So the best personalization is invisible. Patients don't notice AI. They just notice fewer missed appointments, maybe better instructions, better workflows or communication with their providers, maybe better mapping to get to their facility or to their healthcare organization. So all of that really, this will continue to evolve. And certainly understanding how AI can play those journeys. And we'll talk about that also as the show continues on, and certainly in future shows. But AI continues to evolve. I do predict it'll play a more proactive role in areas like predictive analytics for chronic care management, real-time patient monitoring, at-home care models, and as I mentioned, workflow automation. And again, that's all near and dear to my heart. I've been working in this specific space for almost 20 years now, and certainly chronic care management for over 13 years, I think, on Capitol Hill. So getting these programs created and out the door and optimizing the industry. So very excited about the place and the role that AI will play within that. But Jake, I know you've done some great studying here too. Let's hear some of your thoughts.
Yeah, to your point of the predictive analysis, one of our friends, Tony Nunes from AMD, who we mentioned on the last show, also mentioned an example of how now pathologists are often overwhelmed with image review by the volume. Yeah. And by applying AI to pre-read digital pathology slides, the system can now flag the most suspicious cases first, speeding up the review. And this acted as a form of personalization for the clinician's workflow itself. And instead of every case being treated the same, the AI prioritized what mattered the most. And the downstream effect was a faster diagnosis for patients and a more efficient use of clinical expertise.
Yeah, excellent point. And Tony's been talking about that for a long time, and just, how what we've seen, certainly in radiology, that probably has one of the best use cases for AI in the early days. And even, we mentioned John Halamka a couple of times. I know we've got him even coming up in the show, but just how looking for even false positives, where AI can actually look well, sometimes it creates false positives, but also it can look for false positives. So how AI, you got to really understand how it can work for you. And certainly digital pathology, radiology, AI has been applied significantly in that vertical, and it will continue to be. And as you mentioned, acting as a form of personalization in the clinician's workflow, significant. So great points. For the eighth principle, helpful AI at the bedside. And again, I mentioned, John, this is where John's one of his most recent examples, and we love this. He's been on the show. John Halamka from Mayo Clinic has been on the show several times over the past couple of months. And he tells this great story about how ambient listening in the background in the AI was recording what the patient said, everything the patient said during the visit. And the doctor actually had a stethoscope on, and he missed some of the details that the patient was describing about their symptoms. But the AI caught it. The recording, the ambient listening caught it. And so when they actually reviewed it, the doctor did not have it in their notes, but the ambient listening came in, and then the patient said, yes, I did mention that, and it was a very good point. So it makes our doctors better. And I think there's even some other points that have been brought up over the last couple of weeks and months about how if doctors and care providers are not deploying AI in these settings, could actually, cause problems around, I don't want to go as far as the legal problems, but you've got to, these technology innovations are going to be deployed. I think keeping up with what other doctors are doing, trying to be on the front side, the vanguard side of healthcare, where it can protect you. Could it be seen as an issue if you're not deploying AI? Possibly, because again, people will be for legal protections. It can actually protect you because it's going to catch things that you may not be able to catch. It'll make you a better doctor. in a lot of cases. And in most cases that we're seeing, it's going to make you a much better doctor, much better clinician in general. And so just look at that. I don't want to, I don't want to repeat some of the things that I've heard out there, but they're very positive towards using AI. The legal protections that will come across and come around from using AI, I think it's really important. So just think about that. Certainly, as you're looking for the right use case in your clinical setting or in your administrative setting, in your setting in general in healthcare, or how you want to use it personally. An example: documentation consumes 25% of a clinician's workday, and how a large language model or an LLM powered by ambient listening can actually help reclaim a lot of time. There's a recent Wall Street Journal that even shared publicly here quite a bit lately, is how it noted ambient AI scribes can cut documentation time from 90 minutes to under 30 minutes daily. So that really improves not only the accuracy, but also patient interacting and lessening the burnout for the care providers, which is a significant issue. I think it was the number one issue in healthcare over the last couple of years is care provider burnout. So where this, if you can drop the scribing time down by, 66%, that's significant. So not only helping with burnout, but also giving, clinicians time back by also improving the patient experience, and really also restoring, what's exciting is restoring that clinician-patient connection that's been lost in the EHR era. EHRs are really important, to my background. I helped start one of them, almost 20 years ago. So I know the industry very well. I love the EHR industry, but this is an innovation that can actually make EHRs much better, not just ambient listening, but also AI in general. How can you wrap AI around your EHR or integrate it into your EHR and all the benefits that come with it? And again, we're just tipping the iceberg on how it's going to help us on the workflows and items like that. But really sit back and understand, how this can make a difference in your care strategy, scaling your care strategy, maybe create a more efficient ecosystem for your providers, making a better ecosystem for your patients. Again, this is all the importance of the future of healthcare and creating a more sustainable healthcare system long-term for everybody. And again, this goes back to health equity. This is about being scale superior care. We've kind of lost this. Again, we mentioned this is not about technology or innovation. This comes down to the patient. This comes down to the clinician. This comes down to health equity. Again, being able to create a better health ecosystem for everyone, not just one segment or two segments, but for everyone. If we can see more patients, if we can give better care to more patients, more efficient care to more patients, that's what our healthcare system is about. That's creating a more sustainable healthcare system. We can't just continue to spend more money and throw more money at it, but if we can create the efficiencies around this, again, bring the quality of life back to providers, why they got in, allow them to care better, why most care providers, if not all care providers, got into healthcare in the beginning, to care for patients. Patients deserve it. Clinicians deserve it. We all deserve better. And I absolutely believe this is the silver bullet to bring in a lot of this promise forward. And Jake, obviously would love your thoughts here. I'm sure I left something out. I know there's the Kaiser study that we were talking about the other day. Tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, so referring back to the ambient AI, I ran across a Kaiser study that said the reduced after hours charting and improved doctor satisfaction was significantly improved with the ambient AI, and actually cut out documentation time by up to 30%, which is insane. And I mean, going back to the provider burnout, that helps tremendously.
You got it. And hopefully people are starting to see this and sort of read more articles around it. I think the biggest thing for us is, we're covering these 10 principles, but really important to understand, and I'm sure some of your teams are doing this, and I'm about to talk about my 9th principle, which goes to more the medical practices, but understanding where AI can help you today. And again, it's not about biting off the big bite here. It's about taking baby steps, little steps, understanding the strategy, setting your strategy. And again, I'll cover all this here in a moment, but beginning to open up and listen and say, hey, what can AI, or where can AI help us? And looking for those little pieces and seeing some of these, oh my gosh, these other organizations, are having these little wins, whether it's, 90% or 60% less time on documentation, or 30% less time on documentation, whatever it is, those are good wins for care providers and patients. So just think about what it means to you. So our 9th principle is practice level wins. So small organizations can realize value with minimal disruption. And we realize they don't have a lot of resources, and everybody's more resource constrained than ever before. But AI should be plug and play, not require a giant or a large IT staff. So for small organizations, even modest tools like automated messaging, translation, reduction in administrative burdens, and other improvements in patient satisfaction, that all comes with little tweaks with AI, little use cases with AI. It doesn't have to be multi-million dollar projects. Sometimes the biggest win is reducing just no-shows with smarter outreach, which means a lot. That's a lot of income for these practices, no matter what side of practice. I mean, I was there trying to look for some real simple use cases. Again, automated message translation, those really reduce the administrative burden and improve patient experience for practices of all size. But that's an easy win for a small medical practice. When I say small, anywhere from a 1 doctor practice to maybe a 15 doctor practice or larger. But again, it's really applicable to everybody because we all want better messaging. We all want better communication. We all want better patient satisfaction. We want reduced administrative burdens. So these are all little small projects that we all can do, and we all want, reduced no-shows. I hope we do, at least. And so moving into our 10th principle, create an AI adoption playbook for your organization. I've kind of gone through this, and we will continue to. I'm sure we're going to publish the playbook here in the coming weeks, so you can look at it. We'll give you some URLs here in a minute, but we'll go through this and we'll publish all this out for you. But very importantly, is to think about an AI adoption playbook for your organization. And again, start off small, bite size, a couple of workflows. Trust your data. You got to make sure that you have the right data on the input. But again, start somewhere. So adoption is cultural. I've done some thought leadership here. Give teams safe places to learn AI. There's no wrong answers. Just get out there and learn, study, create a playbook, create best practices maybe as a team together and share. What do you guys, hey, what's 1, what's 2, what's 3, what's 4? And maybe create a 10-point or 10 principle adoption playbook for your organization and have everybody get involved. And again, you want to create psychologically safe spaces for people. So there's no wrong answers. You want everybody to kind of get involved. Everybody do their, reading, do their learning. This just goes back to good leadership in general. But AI is really important. Again, it's not about data. This is a cultural input. This is a cultural strategy for everybody. AI is cultural. So again, look for the right education process. Bring the culture up with you. Trust in AI isn't built in a data center. It's built at the team level through safe experimentation. I think one of the examples Jake and I came across, and one of them actually on a radio show a couple months ago, was we hear about hospitals that are running AI hackathons or safe sandboxes so staff can experiment without risk. So again, tons of learning, tons of opportunity without the risk. And reward experimentation, even failures. Leaders should celebrate teams trying AI, even if they fail. And as we all know in healthcare, fail fast, but fail safe. And if we do that in these safe environments, these safe sandboxes, these hackathons, that's where we can learn very quickly. We can scale where we need to. We can do it safely. And when it doesn't work, we fail fast. So, Jake, I know you've got some safeguards recommended that you've helped create and collate. So go ahead and share that with my audience.
Yeah. So with the safe sandboxes, I was doing some research because as we talk about this AI world, it's changing rapidly. There's new data coming out every day. And so we always have to, research day by day. And in doing that research, I came across this article from the World Health Organization who gave some safeguard recommendations. And so firstly, establish guidelines on where AI can and can't be used. Secondly, use diverse data sets and rigorous testing on that AI. Set strong access controls and identity verification, and have explainable AI. So users must know why the model they're working with made a certain suggestion. Have transparent development and continuous dialogue with your team around AI. And lastly, continuously monitor and evaluate the outcomes that the AI is giving you.
Yeah, excellent points in those 6 safeguards. So, guidelines, diverse data sets, strong access controls. So also, I'm a member of CHAI, the Coalition for Health AI. They have a great documentation on a lot of this, on where to start, how to set up a safe AI environment for your organization. We're going to be publishing a lot more in the coming weeks, months, and years. But check out maybe what CHAI is doing if you want to set up a real, functional, scalable, and safe AI environment within your organization. Again, communication here. You said transparent development and continuous dialogue. That goes back to leadership and communication amongst the team. and then really monitoring, the evaluation outcomes. So, this is all, again, about creating the right ecosystem. Create your playbook, know what your guardrails are. Again, great places to start. But again, what's really important here is that you do start. Even researching is starting. That can be part of your playbook. Hey, let's go research and study for a couple of months and then begin to put down step by step for our organization. And it might take you a couple of years to get things built out, or a year to get things built out. And then you get, maybe access to some budgeting. Again, this doesn't have to be expensive. This is a good starting point of just learning, building out what AI does for your organization. If you build that business plan, that playbook, then your organization has something to invest in. Usually leaders want something to invest in. They want to understand all the different realms. So, kind of bringing this all back together again as we close here, reinforce, that AI, that helps comes from fixing the right problem, setting up the right guardrails, and ensuring the right culture for adoption. And as I mentioned, start small and measure and scale successes. So again, start small. Don't try to bite off the apple, bite the whole apple at one time. Little bites, move along. And we have some great thought leadership articles posted at justinbarnes.com and also growthperformance.org. We're being able to share some of this. You'll be able to see this playbook, I'm sure, at those two places here coming up. But also we have a lot of other things just in the philosophy of AI leadership and what you can do to create the right foster the right atmosphere and environment of innovation within your organization so you truly can advance with AI. So anything you want to say here in the closing seconds, Jake?
I think you've covered it. I'm excited to get this AI playbook out on both of those websites that you mentioned so we can, continuously update it as the AI changes.
You got it. And it's always going to change. And to Jake's point there, AI is an evolution. Research, but start somewhere and then build and scale. And always remember your initial data sources your data sources at all times are critically important to how good your AI is. Data is critically important there. Jake, thanks so much, my friend, as always. Great having you on air, my good friend.
Of course. Thank you.
And thanks to everyone for you taking the time out of your busy schedules to join the show. And also a big thank you to all my listeners and supporters who voted us 2024 Podcast of the Year. We are so grateful. And please tune into this show as it broadcasts weekdays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Pacific. As always, you can track me on LinkedIn at Justin T. Barnes or track me on Twitter at HIT Advisor and use the hashtag ThisJustinRadio so I can respond to your comments from the show. And please do reach out to us. We want to hear your comments if you have any regarding this show or any show. If you missed any of this episode or want to hear more, all of my shows are posted on YouTube, Spotify, Apple iTunes, Amazon Music, Megaphone, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, and TuneIn. And also, you can, as I mentioned before, you can check out some of the new content that we published in the Thought Leadership page on justinbarnes.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.